So, thank you very much for being patient. And once again, welcome to our webinar on the subject why entrepreneurs should work harder on understanding customers. And this webinar is hosted by Professor Mark Vanuele. So, I'm Nadia Madzarova, and I'm a program advisor for the Executive Master in Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And I will be your main contact here at HEC, so I will be happy to answer any questions you might have about the program, etc. So just before going deeply into the topic of today, I just wanted to give you the summary. So we will start with some facts about HEC Paris and Coursera, because the Executive Master of Innovation Entrepreneurship is offered by HEC Paris through the Coursera platform. Then I will give you some highlights about the master degree and the new specialization, which will be launched beginning of February. Then we will have the content webinar by Professor Mark Vanuele. And then to finalize this presentation, I will give you some details on how to apply on the master degree. So here are some key facts about HEC Paris. So HEC Paris is a very old institution, and the school has trained top managers since a very long time, most exactly since 1881. Today, HEC Paris is the #1 business school in France and second one in Europe. And it is also #1 school for entrepreneurship in France. You have to bear in mind that we have a partnership also with Station F, which is one of the most successful incubators in the world, which is a very useful information about people who would like to, create their own company and yeah, just I think it's really useful to have this partnership for entrepreneurs. And then. So last but not least, HEC Paris is top 3 in the world of graduating CEOs. Here are now some facts about Coursera platform. So Coursera platform was created in 2012 by 2 Stanford professors, and today they are offering more than 2,000 courses in a variety of subjects like medicine, humanities, engineering, also entrepreneurship, etc. And today, thanks to the Coursera platform, there are over 33 million users in the world who are doing classes and learning new things thanks to the Coursera platform. And they're also partnering with over 150 institutions across the globe, including HEC Paris. So here are some highlights about the very unique Master of Innovation and Entrepreneurship. So this program was designed for people who would like to, either create their own company or to bring more added value within the company they're working for. So the program is focusing on innovation and entrepreneurship. By doing this program, you will have the unique chance to earn an internationally recognized degree from a world-class institution like HEC Paris. The very big advantage of this program is the fact that it is fully online. That means you don't need to come to the campus for the sitting classes. Everything will be online through the Coursera platform. This program was also designed for people who have professional responsibilities, so it's really compatible with a full-time work. But of course, you need to find the right time for you to do the program, because the program requires very important commitment. And last but not least, most of the courses, they are recorded, so you can work offline for some of these courses. And then you need to bear in mind that this executive master degree has a very attractive tuition fees of 20,000 euros. what kind of population do we have in this executive master? So we have for sure some aspiring entrepreneurs and also employees entrepreneurs, as I mentioned before, people who would like to bring more added value within the company they're working for. We have what I call serial entrepreneurs, people who have created more than one company and who would like to learn more about entrepreneurship and even create other companies. And we also have consultants and managers and executives. So this program is not only about entrepreneurs, but also for people who have a very a good experience, because we have a minimum requirement of 5 years professional experience. So just before going deeply into the content webinar of today, I just wanted to take advantage of this presentation and introduce you the new specialization in the online certificate, which will be available from February this year through the Coursera platform still. So if you don't have the time, or if you just would like to try some of the classes, participate in some of the classes which are part of the master degree, you have two choices. The first one will be starting with the new specialization in managing innovation and design thinking, which is made of 4 courses like boosting creativity, organization for innovation, design thinking, etc. And this will be possible only for $79 per month. Then, if you would like to learn more, you can start also with the online certificate, which is made of 10 courses. Or in these 10 courses, you will have the 4 courses of the specialization plus 6 other courses. And the new price of this online certificate is 3,450 euros, and you have the possibility to pay in 3 installments. So this is the new format of the certificate, because till January, we had 12 courses and the price was 5,000 euros. And of course, if you're ready to go deep into the master degree, you can start directly with the master after having submitted your online application. And in the master degree, you will have 20 courses, which are the 10 courses of the certificate, plus the 10 other courses, which are the project-based part. And the price for the master degree is 20,000 euros. And of course, you can once again pay into 3 installments. That means you will have to, in case of admission, you will have to pay a tuition deposit, and then for the rest of the tuition fees, you can pay 3 times. So now I would like to leave Mark Van Uele introduce himself and give you more details and explain you why entrepreneurs should work harder on understanding customers.
Hello, everyone. Good to see so many people on board. Let me remind you, or tell you in case you didn't know, that you can ask questions throughout the session, and Nadia will take a look at these questions while I'm presenting, and then I'm gonna at some point answer them to the best I can. I am a professor in marketing, as the title slide says. I have been at HEC Paris for 25 years, and most of that time I have been working with large companies. In the B2C world, I've been working with large data sets, not at all in the entrepreneurial world. And it just happened that a couple of years ago, I was, together with other people, at the initiative of the creation of a startup capital fund for entrepreneurs who are active in or who graduated from HEC, but also from the schools and universities in the HEC ecosystem. I'll explain later on what that is. And then shortly afterwards, I was asked by our dean to explore the possibility of creating a 100% online program in innovation and entrepreneurship, which is the one we are promoting here. This is a promotion session of that program. And so this introduced me to the entrepreneurial world. And then I regularly attend pitches in my role in that investment fund, but also in other settings. And at some point, during a presentation by a startup that wanted to get money for its venture, I was wondering, where is the customer here? Where is the customer? And so that brought me to the theme of today's session. And then I realized that actually in most of the presentations that I had seen by startup companies, I could have asked the same question. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not that these people don't have the word customer or client or consumer or prospect in their pitches. Not at all. It's that they don't really have a customer orientation. Let me illustrate this with an example. This is actually a slide that comes from a pitch. And so this is one of the first slides in this pitch. It starts with parking is a big unsolved problem. And so you see that the cost in the US to people looking for parking is $98 billion, right? Part goes to gas and time wasted, and then there's parking tickets. And so what you see there is a big need. And we all know personally also from our experience what a hassle it is sometimes to find a parking spot. Now the problem is that most entrepreneurs, once they have seen a big need like this and had the insight of how they could develop a solution. And in this particular case, I will not go into detail on this project because I'm bound by a non-disclosure agreement, but basically it's a system with sensors and mapping that they have developed. And so this startup has worked on the project for between 1 and 2 years on the technology side, because their perspective is there's this big need there. We're going to solve it somehow for some people to find parking in an easier way. Therefore, it's going to create value for them. So let's focus on the solution, okay? Because we're going to touch at least part of this market. We're going to grab at least part of this market. Even if you only have 1% of this market, this will be amazing, right? Now, I would call this slide a mirage. You know what a mirage is in the desert? It's something that not exists. It's actually a reflection, a magnified reflection of something that is somewhere there, but the mirage as such is not reality. And so I call this a mirage because what I want to see as an investor, what I want to see as a marketing professor, is how they think they will be able to convince one person, one consumer, hopefully many more, to buy into a solution. So we have this big need there, but the question is, can you make people adopt a solution? And if so, how much will they be willing to pay? That is the question that I'm interested in. And the problem with most entrepreneurial projects is that they observe a need, so implicitly, latently, there is a customer present, but then all the attention goes to developing a solution. And the assumption is, okay, once we have a good solution, all we have to do once the solution is ready is to advertise, announce that we have a solution, and people will come knocking at our door. Well, very often they don't. They don't because the solution actually doesn't speak to them, right? The solution is a technical solution, but it does not make them change their habits, and it does not make them put money on the table. And so that's the question. How do you convince people to create space in their minds, to create space in their wallet for your product, for your service? And you need customer orientation from that throughout the project. That's the main message here. Now we're going to develop this message in more detail, and I'm going to give you other examples. let me, this is the plan. So I'm going to give you some context on where my observation comes from. And then I'm going to show you that there is this gap between entrepreneurship as a domain and the notion of customer. I'm going to basically quantify the problem there. Then we're going to look together at the origins of the problem. I'm going to explain more in detail why I think it's a real problem, why actually entrepreneurs are very often misguided because they're not sufficiently customer oriented. And I'm going to propose a way of looking at things differently, changing perspectives where I will try to bridge entrepreneurship and customer orientation, entrepreneurship and marketing. And so at the end, I'm going to translate that in a checklist for investors, because my message not only goes to people who want to create their companies, my message also goes to investors, because I think it's also the role of investors to make sure that the pitches they get do qualify in terms of customer orientation. I think investors very often make wrong decisions because they don't have strong requirements on customer orientation. The chances of success of startups will be multiplied by at least 3 to 5 times, I think, if entrepreneurs would be more customer oriented. Okay, so some context first. Nadia has already talked about HEC Paris. So HEC Paris is a standalone business school. We have 4,500 students in a full range of programs, from pre-experience all the way to executive education. Now, the school itself is at 20 minutes driving south of Paris. Most of you know Versailles, so we're actually very close to Versailles. And the area where we are situated is called the Plateau of Saclay. And so in the second bullet point, you see the word Saclay. Saclay is actually a small village, but Saclay happens to be an ecosystem where you have 15% of the R&D capacity of France concentrated. We have 5 engineering schools in the neighborhood and 3 universities. And so that's HEC's ecosystem. And so I mentioned the startup fund, which officially is called Paris-Saclay Seed Fund. And here we have a screen capture of that fund, which is accessible to graduates of HEC and of the other schools on the Saclay Plateau. And so if you join the Master of Science in Innovation and Entrepreneurship, you qualify to obtain funding, to pitch at least, to obtain funding from that fund. Okay, HEC also has actually 2 incubators, one which is our own, and then we also are present in the Station F, as Nadia already said. Station F is the largest incubator in the world. So here we have our HEC people at Station F, and this is the Station F itself. It's housed in a former train station, and so we have a large number of desks at the Station F. So I assume you know already about the online master if you joined from the outset of this webinar. Nadia just explained the online masters, and she's going to return to that at the end. And then I'm a marketing professor, which explains why I asked the question, where is the customer, of course. Now, HEC has more than 40 years of experience in entrepreneurship programs. And so that's why we chose to do an online master's in entrepreneurship, because we have so much heritage, so much experience with this. But another reason is that we notice that most of the students we get on our campus today, actually 50% declare that they want to start their own company. And we see after they graduated that actually 1/5 of them has at least has one startup that they launched, and they're actually quite successful. So per year, we roughly support 400 projects. So HEC very present in entrepreneurship, and that's also how I got, as a marketing professor, initially working with large companies, how I got into entrepreneurship. Okay, so that's the context. Let's go back to our question now. Where is the customer? First question I asked myself is this just me? And is this just the people that I see presenting, mainly HEC students? Is this a local problem or is this a global problem, if you want? And given that I was new to entrepreneurship, I was wondering, my colleague business professor in entrepreneurship, are they talking about the customer? And one way of checking this is that I looked at the journals, and these are academic journals that they are writing in. And I asked myself, these people, so they publish their best ideas and research in these top academic journals in entrepreneurship. To what extent do they talk about the customer? So I looked at the two most important journals in that discipline, and they're called Entrepreneurship Theory and Practice and Journal of Business Venturing. And both these journals have existed for somewhere between, I think, 35 and 40 years. I looked at all the articles that have been published. So in the first case, 1,264, second case, 1,241. And I looked in the database for the number of articles that had customer in the title, and you see this is just a couple. Then I looked in the abstract, and the word customer also was very rarely present. If you look at what the base is, almost 2,000, almost 1,300, you see there's actually very little representation of the customer. So knowing that, I assume that these entrepreneurship professors also in their teaching, they pay very little attention to the customer. So that already signals that this is not just a local problem, this is a global problem, right? But let's go a bit further, because not every entrepreneur goes to business school, right? Now, if you are an entrepreneur who has not gone to business school, you may seek inspiration, for instance, from buying a book. So what I did was I went on Amazon and I looked for books that had entrepreneurship and customer. I typed into Amazon, I looked for books using the keywords entrepreneurship and customer. And Amazon only proposed me 4 books. So this is the first book, Entrepreneurship Marketing. Looks like a textbook that could be used in business school. And so that's one of the proposals that Amazon made to me. Then there's this one, The Entrepreneur's Guide to Customer Development. And that's a fantastic book. And this is a book that I'll talk a little bit more about later on. Then there's this one here, How Any Startup Can Achieve Explosive Customer Growth. So main title is Traction. I took a look at that book and noticed that there's a little quote, a recommendation basically, from Eric Ries at the bottom. Now, Eric Ries is somebody who started the lean startup movement. I'm going to get back to this at the end. And the previous book is actually an application of the lean startup movement to customer development. And then this is the 4th book, and this is basically a book not targeted to entrepreneurs, but to researchers on entrepreneurship. Okay, so Amazon only gives me 4 books in the academic literature produced by and read by business professors in entrepreneurship. We just see a couple of articles with customer in the title. So these two together signal that it's a global problem, right? Now, to compound the problem in terms of inspiration and literature that's already out there, we also have basically what I would call an ideology among entrepreneurs, among startuppers, that there's no real need to listen to the customer too much. And actually that may hurt if you listen to the customer too much. And so let's zoom in on that, what I could call ideology. It has three components. So the first component is the idea that customers do not know what they want. Of course, if you ask them what they want, they will tell something, and they will often tell what they think you want to hear. Okay, so customers are not a good source of information on wants, on needs. That's the first idea. So let's examine that idea. This quote from Henry Ford here, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, kind of as an emblematic quote to represent the idea here, right? So if you ask people what they want more of what they know and more of what they have already, not something different, right? So customers are not a good source of inspiration on new things, on real innovations. That's the idea here. And you can actually find some confirmation of that. Let me give you an illustration of type of confirmation. Let's go back to the launch of the iPad. So we go back to 2010, I think, and Steve Jobs himself in January at the annual Apple event, he presented the iPad, and the initial reactions in the press were negative. There was lots of disappointment. And so people said things like, this is like an iPod with a bigger screen, right? What's new here? We already have that, it just has a bigger screen. So here we have a reference to Newsweek. And so that's also a person who said, let me check that here. It's just another computer. Nothing new here. Now, interestingly, the same person who wrote that article in Newsweek later on, like a month later, received an iPad, could try it out, and suddenly was elated. Okay, and the same journalist then wrote, the user interface is so natural that it disappears. Right? So this is a specialist. This is a person who for a living analyzes and writes about technology, right? So this is somebody who likes technology a priori, but was disappointed by the presentation by Steve Jobs, who's actually a good presenter, right? And why was he disappointed? Because he had misjudged the value of the iPad, the customer value of the iPad. And the customer value of the iPad, you can only discover when you use the iPad, right? So it doesn't make sense to ask customers what they want, because even when you show them something they may want, they may not realize it is what they want. They have to discover for themselves that this actually is fantastic and corresponds to something that they didn't know that they wanted. Right? So this anecdote is a confirmation of that idea, and so I accept that idea. So the first pillar of the ideology of entrepreneurs, to refuse to listen to the customer, I accept. There's a second one, which is that incremental improvement is not enough to disrupt an industry. And so again, asking customers for ideas seldom leads to breakthrough innovation. That's one I often hear. A lot of startuppers kind of like the glamour of thinking themselves that they will disrupt an industry. They will introduce a disruptive innovation. Well, that's one I want to put into question. And let me actually go back to Apple to put this into question. What I have here is a quote from The Economist. Let me read it. Apple is regularly voted the most innovative company in the world, but its inventiveness takes a particular form. Rather than developing entirely new product categories, it excels at taking existing half-baked ideas and showing the rest of the world how to do them properly. Okay, so this is not innovating in a disruptive way, right? This is continuous incremental innovation. And nevertheless, it creates tremendous value for customers and tremendous financial value for Apple, right? So actually, most of the value created in the world for customers and financially comes from incremental innovation, not from disruptive innovations. So I don't accept this as excuse for not listening to the customer. I'm going to get back to this. I want to talk again later on about disruptive innovations and how customers can play a role in disruptive innovations. There is a third pillar of this ideology, which is that inventions are based on technical insights on how one item of technology can be applied in another field. That is, inventions can just come from inventors. They cannot come from customers because they don't have these technical insights. So it doesn't make sense to consult customers on that. And again, this is one that we have to accept. But later on, I'm going to say that, okay, there is inventions and there's innovations, and these are two different things. We both need inventions and innovations. Okay, so summarizing, customers do not know what they want. Correct to some extent. Incremental improvement is not enough to disrupt an industry with breakthrough innovations. I think this is a bad excuse, and I'm going to get back to this later on. And then inventions are based on technical insights on how one item of technology can be applied in another. Yes, I accept that, and we really need inventions, and we need entrepreneurs who invent, and sometimes at some point during the process don't listen to the customer, but at some point in the process they have to listen to the customer. I'll get back to this. All right. So I talked about the misconceptions, what I call the ideology among entrepreneurs about the interest of listening to the customer. We saw that entrepreneurship as a discipline in business schools give little attention to the customer. But third, another problem and another explanation for this gap between entrepreneurship and customer orientation is marketing, actually. Marketing as a discipline in business schools, and I'm a marketing professor and I'm to blame also. We show little interest for entrepreneurship. When we teach marketing and when we teach marketing strategy, we present something called the STP model: segmentation, targeting, and positioning. And you'll find this in all the marketing textbooks. So number one, what you have to do is you have to segment your markets. And you see there's 3 steps, 1, 2, 3. And then among the segments that you have identified, you have to select the one or couple of most attractive segments. Step number 2, we call this market targeting. And then you develop a value proposition for each target segment. Okay, so you see the logic here. You start with the customer, you select, or with possible customers, you select customers you want to go after, and then you develop something for them, right? But this assumes that you have lots of knowledge already about possible customers. And so only from step 6 onwards, we start developing things. That's not at all how you think as entrepreneurs, right? As an entrepreneur, you see a need out there in the world, and you see a way to address that need. So you connect the dots, and so that's a value proposition already in a rudimentary form, right? And then you're going to look for a market, a possible market, right? So this STP model doesn't speak at all to you, right? Because it says that you have to start by analyzing the possible markets and look for needs, right? And that's the way we teach marketing. So the way we teach marketing and have taught marketing for decades doesn't speak to entrepreneurs. That's something we have to work on as marketers. Okay, so now we know where it all comes from. We made a diagnosis of where it all comes from. Is it so bad? Is this how wrong is this? Well, what I see happening with startup projects and entrepreneurial projects is the following. Very often there's a lack of depth in understanding customer needs. And the projects and the inventions, products and services would have been developed in a much more promising way immediately when there was some effort, had there been some effort in understanding customer needs from the outset. So entrepreneurs too quickly jump from observation of a problem, vision of a solution, to working and developing on that vision without going back to the customer. Unrealistic market sizing. So I can refer back to the example on the parking problem, where we had a very unrealistic market sizing. If the target market is not clear to you, then you don't know whose needs exactly you want to serve. And sometimes small differences between possible customers can have big implications for the design of your product and service. Another problem is that eventually you have to convince customers to adopt your product. And maybe you see yourself as being the first in the market, but people usually already have some type of alternative to deal with their problem. And so it's in your interest to, from the outset, have a really strong, what in marketing we call value proposition or positioning statement. And that you align all your design initiatives with that value proposition. What I see happening very often in pitches is that the business plan is completely unrealistic because it's based on initial contacts with possible customers, so leads, or initial sales that actually cannot be scaled up because they're based on a market that was easily accessible for the inventors. And of course, that's where you have to start, right? But then the approach is not scalable because you cannot go for the markets, the large markets that you're really interested in, because your solution or your go-to-market strategy are not scalable. And finally, as an investor, I would like to see stronger evidence that there are prospective customers out there who are willing to pay, right? And that's something that should not come at the end. That's again something that you should think about at the start already because it's going to influence the design of your product, right? So I think not thinking customer has a lot of consequences, and condemns a lot of startup projects or handicaps them in the development of their actual potential. And so all of that then leads to questionable demonstrations of what in what is called traction. So it's basically financial potential. All right, let's try now that we have observed the problem, let's look at what we can do about this. Now that I entered the field of entrepreneurship, something I got very interested in is the entrepreneurial mind, the entrepreneurial mindset. What makes you an entrepreneur? And there's a lot of research that shows that entrepreneurs have a different mind, have different brains than non-entrepreneurs. Something entrepreneurs have that other people don't have is that somehow they have this kind of scanner, this alertness to changes in the environment that create opportunities for inventions and for business. Okay, and so that's something that non-entrepreneurs don't have. And something else that entrepreneurs have is this capability to connect elements of information in an innovative way. And so I call this, between quotes, connecting the dots. So that's something that is specific to entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurship is a typical individual activity because it builds on these cognitive capabilities that these people have, right? Now, if we look at marketing, marketing is usually happening inside a firm with teams of people. And these teams of people, they study the market, they try to keep track of customer trends, of market trends. And so that's the source of information, very different type of source of information, right? And so the objective is to identify possible customers, prospects with unmet needs. So opportunity recognition works in a very, very different way. It's data-based. It's objective information based. It's not an individual spotting an opportunity. And so the question is, how can we bridge these two mental worlds, right? Well, one way to bridge it is to make entrepreneurs a little bit more customer oriented. And another way is to make marketing more oriented towards entrepreneurs. Okay. And of course, a third way is to make people with a marketing background working together with entrepreneurs. Okay. So as I said already, there has to be invention by entrepreneurs. And I'll call this market driving innovations. Okay, so these are innovations that sometimes create a new market. And then there is market-driven innovation, where you basically listen to the market, and that's the marketing approach, right? You listen to the market, you listen to customers, and that generates ideas for innovation. And you see that there has to be some overlap between entrepreneurship and marketing. We need both to make the world a better place. We need both sources of innovation. And so you need to find a way to combine them. Another way of expressing the same idea, and now I'm reasoning in terms of projects. So when you take a vertical slice, that is a project. Every project should listen to some extent to the inventor's voice and to some extent to the customer's voice, but every project should listen to both voices. Okay. Now, the degree to which you will listen to each voice will put you in the marketing or the entrepreneurship camp. That's another way of expressing the same idea. Now, let's look at how to further bridge the gap between the two. A lot of people don't know this, but in marketing, even marketing professors sometimes don't know that in marketing, there has been research on discontinuous innovations. And so I refer here to a specific article in California Management Review from a long time ago. And that article, what they did in this article was based on retrospective interviews. They analyzed the innovation process that's behind the creation of 4 disruptive innovations. One was fiber optics, and that's been developed by Dow Corning. Another was the cell phone, which has been developed by Motorola. There was NutraSweet, aspartame basically, and I'm looking for the third one, the CT scanner by General Electric. So this article asked the people who were involved in these continuous innovations to look back in time at how the innovations came about. And what we see, what the authors saw, is that in each case, the innovations were the result of an interaction between inventors and the markets. What they did in each case was develop prototypes and check reactions from a plausible initial markets. And initially the market said no. Customers came up with all kinds of reasons why they didn't find the project interesting, but this gave ideas to then revise the offer, revise the product. And the new cycle was then started. And so that cycle is called probe and learn. And that cycle for these disruptive innovations, that cycle continued for years. And eventually they got viable products. Okay. Now, this process actually may ring a bell with many of you, because that same process is now the essence of the lean startup movement, where the lean up startup movement says build a minimum viable product, then go to the market, measure their reactions, learn, build again. So it's the same idea that is now the essence of the lean startup movement. But this idea has been around for a very, very long time already. Okay, so that's what I mean by listening to the customer. You don't try to fine tune and make your solution perfect as possible to your own norms. No, you build something which is called minimum viable, which possible customers can give an opinion on, and then you listen to them in order to guide your future development. So that's the idea. That's what I would like to see in each startup project. So for each project, let me go back to that drawing that I already used. Each project is like an arrow, like the red arrow in the bottom. And what you see is that the customer's voice is present from the outset, and the customer's voice increases relative to the inventor's voice as we get closer to the final product. That's the idea. Okay. So the problem with most startups is that they think along what I have here on the slide. You have an insight on how you can address a customer's needs. You come up with your invention. Eventually, you develop a product and you try to make it as perfect as possible. You start producing. You put everything into place for producing, and then you call on marketing. Go find customers. Tell customers we are ready, and then you hope to get customers, but very often you don't, because you haven't thought about the customer from step one onwards. So let me finish with an example. This is another story, something that I experienced. A startup company that has invented a diagnostic instrument that medical doctors, individual medical doctors, general practitioners actually can use. And so they actually interacted with customers. They co-developed with medical doctors their products. And then when it was ready, when they had started production, it actually did not take off. And they didn't understand where the problem was coming from, because they had co-developed with medical doctors, right? And then they started, they actually called on outsiders to examine the problem. And these outsiders contacted doctors and they asked doctors, what would convince you to buy this product? And the medical doctor said, well, I would like to see it being used in hospitals by experts, by people that I look up to. And unfortunately, the product had been completely developed for individual medical doctors. And so the company had paid a lot of attention to the size of the instrument and also to the affordability. Okay. Now, to convince hospitals to buy the same product, it actually would not have worked, because although the core product could have been the same, hospitals, what they want is something sturdy. They don't care about size, but in hospitals, this instrument would have been used by a lot of different people. And so the technical specifications had to be completely different. And so you see that the company, the startup behind this, had worked with the customer, but actually had not thought about how the customer eventually would buy, because how the customer eventually would buy was by listening to the hospitals. And so in this case here, I have an acronym here, which refers to the Parisian system of hospitals, which is basic, which has a big influences for the rest of the country. Now, to convince the hospitals to adopt basically the same solution, a completely different product was needed. So version 2, and so it took the company a couple of more years actually to develop something which was appealing to these clinics. Okay, conclusion. So I think entrepreneurs have misperceptions about the interest of listening to the customers. We as marketers, marketing professors, we have to learn to value the voice of the entrepreneur. And so that is something I learned, and I am one of the creators of one of the courses in the master's program. And so that course builds on that idea that you have to respect the voice of the entrepreneur, but help the entrepreneur to bringing the customer as early on as possible in the process. Entrepreneurs, I would hope that you team up with marketers, because marketers are specialists in bringing in the customer, right? They are specialists in customer orientation. And note that intrapreneurs actually have the ability more than entrepreneurs to bridge the two worlds, because very often inside their company, they already have marketers who can help them with innovation. I promised that I would also look at what this implies for investors. I'm going to go quickly over that, and then Nadia is going to conclude. So here we have students pitching to investors to get funding. What should investors look for? Well, I have a list here, but so basically you want to have evidence that this startup is able to listen to customers, able to listen to customers in a very open format, able to learn from what they hear, okay? You want to see some method in the selection of the target segment. Think back about the parking example. Where is the target market? There is none, right? They think that somehow they will find it. You want to show as an entrepreneur to investors that you have a value proposition that has been tested with customers and that generates a willingness to pay. Okay, so I want to press investors to check for that. All right, I'm at the end here of my talk. We would like to do a quick survey here at the end, and we would like to know why you attended this webinar. So normally you should see the survey, the little poll now on your screen. Please let us know why you attended this seminar. This webinar, sorry. And Nadia is going to finish with some practical information about the program. Thank you for your interest and your attention.
So we will give you some more time, like 30 seconds more maybe, for everyone to be able to give us some information, because we're quite curious about the reasons you have been able today to reach this very interesting webinar by Professor Marc Banuele. So several seconds more just before closing the session with some information about the master degree. Okay, so I will close. I hope that everybody were able to vote. Okay, so I will close now. Thank you for having voted. So, well, this was a sample of one of the courses we have in the very unique Executive Master in Innovation Entrepreneurship, but maybe now it's time to give you some useful information about how you can apply to the master. So there is a very selective process, because we need to make sure that the people we have in this program, they are very motivated, they're able to bring something to the table to the other participants, they have a project that is aligned to the program. So that's the reason why we will ask you to fill in an online application and to give us some information like some personal and professional information, to submit some documents like English CV, photo ID, university transcript, diploma, etc. But the things that will take a little bit more time would be the 7 ECs you have to write down, because for us it's really important to have some more information about your previous experiences, about your project, etc. Then we will also ask you for an English test as soon as the program is fully in English. So it's really important to have a very good level of English in order to be able to interact with the others, to understand the things that will be taught during the program, etc. So we do accept the TOEIC, the TOEFL, IELTS test, and the Cambridge test also. So make sure that you will pass the test before the deadline of the application process. And last but not least, we will ask you to record a 3-minute video pitch, which is really very important to us, because thanks to this video pitch, through this video pitch, we need to understand, to feel your motivation to join the program and to understand, I would say, quite quickly your project, but also your professional experiences. So I would like also to underline that we don't ask for GMAT, because the minimum of professional experience is 5 years of consistent professional experience, and we also need people with a minimum of bachelor degree. So some useful information about the tuition of the master. So the tuition fees of the master degree is 20,000 euros. The advantage is that you can also pay in installments. In any case, in case of admission, we will need a tuition deposit of 5,000 euros, and the rest of the tuition fees you can pay in 3 installments, which will have to be done 2, 5, and 8 months after the beginning of the program. As I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, you can also, if you don't have the time to start directly with the master degree, you can opt for the online certificate, which is the first part of the master degree, and then you can also continue to the master degree. And the new price of the online certificate, as I once again mentioned at the beginning, is 3,450 euros, because the program has evolved, and we also reduced the number of the courses in the online certificate. So, and you need to bear in mind that if you start with the online certificate, and then if you decide to continue in the master degree, of course, the price of the online certificate you already have paid will be deducted from the tuition fees for the master degree. Maybe you already have seen that the next intake will be in June 2019, and you still have the chance to apply for this intake, because, well, we have what we call the enrolling deadlines, and the next one will be 18th of February, which is the deadline for submitting the full application with the different parts I already mentioned. And this is also the deadline for our early bird offer of 2,000 euros off. That means if you apply by February 18, and if you're admitted to the program, the tuition fees for the master degree will be 18,000 euros instead of 20,000 euros. So it's really a great opportunity for you to join HEC Paris, to learn new things about entrepreneurship, innovation, business plan, how to create your business plan, etc., and to be a part of the executive community of HEC and meet new and amazing people. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm Nadia, and I'm your program advisor. So if you need some information about the program, you can come back to me by email or by telephone. Then you also have the link on which you can also book a slot for a quick phone interview, and during which I will be happy to learn more about your project, to give you more details about the program, and to help you in the admissions process. So thank you, Mark, for this great webinar, this great content webinar. So thank you all for being connected today, and to learn a lot of things about marketing and customers. And at that stage, I would like to once again to say thank you to all of you, and well, hope to see you soon at HEC Paris. Thank you very much.